Hey there, my dear traveler. Welcome to Whispers of Sleep, where quiet hearts gather, and soft rain taps gently at the window. Here, we light a candle for memory, and open a page to the past. If you're here to rest, you're in the right place. Tonight's story is called The Book with a Dried Flower Inside. It's a tale of soft pages, unsent poems, and the love that lingers in silence. So grab your blanket, get cozy, and let your heart float slowly through the words. You're not alone. We're all just looking for something we once loved. Ready? Let us begin. Part 1. The book returns. The rain had started an hour ago, soft, deliberate, like it had nowhere else to be. I sat by the window of the small book cafe on the corner of Willow and Pine, the kind of place where old jazz records play low enough to become part of your breath. It was the kind of town you either never left or never came back to. I had done both. After the divorce, I didn't really know where else to go. My name is Anna, and I'm 46. No children. No pets. Just me, a suitcase, and a quiet ache I'd stopped naming. My Aunt Elaine passed away 3 months ago, and in her will, she left me the house dusty and lavender scented like it had paused in the 70s. I hadn't been inside since I was 19. And I hadn't planned to stay long. But today, something held me back from leaving. Maybe it was the smell of old pages in the attic, or maybe it was just the rain telling me I had nowhere to be. I'd found the book this morning, buried under a pile of magazines with faded headlines. The cover was worn, but familiar. The Painted Veil. I remembered reading it in college, maybe twice. But this copy wasn't mine. I brought it with me to the cafe, half from curiosity, half because I didn't want to be alone with the silence in that house. I opened the book slowly, careful not to snap the binding. That's when it happened. A dried flower slipped out, no note, no ribbon, just delicate, paper thin, and pressed between pages 142 and 143. My heart paused. It was a violet. I recognized it instantly. And suddenly, I wasn't in the cafe anymore. I was 17 again, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the old library at Westfield High, my fingers brushing against paper like skin. You know how sometimes a smell hits you and it's not just memory, it's transport. That's what the violet did. There'd been a boy. Quiet. Always wore corduroy jackets and smelled faintly of cedar and ink. He used to leave little folded poems inside the books I read, never signed, never spoken of. Just lines that made me blush and wonder. To the girl who reads by the east window, your silence is louder than the rain. I never found out who he was. Or maybe I did, and I've forgotten. But this flower, this violet, meant something. I held it gently, afraid even my breath might break it. The edges were curled, but it hadn't crumbled. Not completely. It had survived. Just like me. The rain picked up outside. I sipped my tea Earl Grey with too much milk and looked down at the book again. Page 142 held a small underlined sentence. The last word of every love story is memory. I hadn't underlined it. My fingers trembled just slightly. I turned the page back. On the inside cover, barely visible in the faded spine, were initials. AD. I don't remember everyone I went to school with, but those letters, they stirred something. Something warm and unfinished. And that's how it began again, not with a phone call or a message, but with a forgotten flower in a forgotten book. Funny, isn't it, my friend, how the past knows just when to knock. I think I'll stay a little longer. Just to remember. Just to follow the petals. Part 2. The Library Boy. I remember the way the library smelled. A mix of old pages, floor wax, and rain dampening the stone path just outside. It wasn't a large place, just a narrow, two-story room tucked between the post office and a bakery in our small town. But to me, it always felt like another world. I used to go there every Wednesday after school, back when I was 16. I'd bring my notebook, not because I had any homework to do, but because I liked to pretend I did. Mostly, I just wrote fragments of thoughts and stared out the tall window overlooking the street. And then there was him. The boy. He was always already there when I arrived. Same seat, far side of the reading table, near the poetry section. He never made a sound, just turned the pages slowly, like each word had weight. He wore the same brown sweater nearly every week. His hair always looked like he'd just run his hands through it nervously. And he always had this faraway look, as though whatever he was reading wasn't as interesting as something or someone else across the room. But we never spoke. Not really. A glance. A nod. A shy smile if we both reached for the same book. That was all. Until that afternoon in early spring. I had borrowed a worn-out copy of Emily Dickinson's poems. I took it home, curled up in my bed, and leafed through the pages, thinking I might understand her better this time. And then I saw it scrawled neatly in the margin on the third page. To the girl by the window. You look like someone who believes in quiet miracles. My breath caught. I read it again. Not part of the poem. Definitely not printed. Handwritten, tilted just so, in the kind of careful script that someone practiced when they wanted to be taken seriously. I knew it was him. Somehow, I just did. The handwriting, the timing, the way he looked at me but never said anything. He had left me something, a whisper on paper. And it felt wonderful. Scary, maybe, but mostly like something delicate, blooming just under the surface. I went back the next Wednesday, heart thudding like I'd swallowed it wrong. But he wasn't there. Not that week. Not the next. Just like that, the boy vanished. But the poem stayed with me. Like a bookmark in time. Like a beginning that never got its middle. Now, sitting here in this quiet cafe decades later, watching the rain tap gently against the window, I wonder if he ever thought I'd read it. If he imagined me holding that page, smiling with my knees pulled up, dreaming about a boy with messy hair and poems tucked in his sleeves. Dear, have you ever found a message meant just for you? Hidden in a place no one else would think to look. A page, a lyric, a note in the margin. Sometimes, I think those quiet gestures matter more than all the loud declarations in the world. Because they're left behind not to be seen by everyone, but by someone. Someone who might one day remember. Part 3, Petals Between Pages. I still remember the first time I saw my name without seeing my name. Hidden in metaphor, folded within a line that felt like a secret just for me. If roses had names, hers would be stitched in every petal. I read that line over and over in the library's reading nook, the corner near the frosted window that always smelled like old paper and coffee. It wasn't signed, of course. But it was written in the same careful, slightly slanted handwriting I'd noticed before. Neat, delicate. Mail, maybe. I couldn't be sure. But every letter curved like it had been whispered into existence. He'd written in the margins of a collection of modern poetry, nothing mainstream. One of those titles only weirdos and wanderers picked off the shelves. Like me. Like him. From then on, I found more. Not every time, but enough times that it felt like a rhythm. A kind of breath shared between two unseen souls. Notes tucked in between pages, always at the most unexpected yet perfect moment. A haiku written on the inside back cover. Beneath library light. Her shadow leans over her thought. Winter breath holds still. Another time, a line scribbled on a slip of newspaper. Some people underline books. I underline people. Each discovery made my pulse flicker in quiet surprise. Like I was being seen. But gently. Not watched. Not pursued. Just noticed. Reverently, I began to write back. At first, hesitantly. A small note of thanks on a sticky tab, tucked into a non-fiction book I hoped he might read. Your words feel like warm tea in winter. Thank you. It felt silly, but also thrilling. Like casting a bottle into a silent sea and waiting for the tide to answer. He did. The next book had a dried lavender sprig inside, its scent faint but stubborn, clinging to the paper. The poem that accompanied it read, "If she reads this line, then the silence between us has already spoken." I held that book close to my chest and sat there for an entire afternoon, legs curled beneath me, lost in something quieter than love, but perhaps just as deep. That's how our secret communication began. Not with voices, not with names, but with petals and poems. And still, to this day, I don't know why I never asked who he was. Or maybe I just didn't want to know. Not yet. Part 4. The First Flower. The spring air smelled different that week. Lighter, somehow. As if the earth had sighed and opened its lungs for the first time in months. I remember the way my sweater felt too warm as I stepped into the library, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, tracing golden lines across the wooden floor. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just something familiar. Something that wouldn't demand too much. I ran my fingers along the poetry shelf, letting them glide over names I knew, names I loved. My hand stopped at one, Pablo Neruda, the same book I had checked out before. I slipped it from the shelf, and as I opened the worn pages something slid free. A soft flutter, barely a whisper. I looked down and saw it, a pressed flower, fragile and papery, its colors faded but not gone. Pale violet with a golden center. A pansy. Tucked just behind it was a folded note. My heart gave a small, private thud. I unfolded it, hands careful like they were holding time itself. It was a poem handwritten in that same narrow, slanted script I'd come to recognize over the past few months. Spring forgets its own beginnings. But your smile, like this flower, remembers warmth. I see you. That was the first time he left a flower. The first time the poem stepped into something almost intimate. I touched the petal. It felt like an echo, like something left behind just for me. Still, we had never spoken. Not a word. Just glances. Just that quiet understanding that formed in the spaces between silence and ink. After school, I sat on the back steps of our porch, legs tucked under me, reading the poem again. My mother passed by, looked at the flower in my hand, and smiled like she knew something I didn't. "You're blushing," she teased, brushing a stray hair from my face. "Am I asked, hiding the paper behind my back. But I was. That night, I found myself writing. Not in response exactly, but something of my own. You're the whisper between the pages. Of books I never meant to finish. I didn't sign it. I simply folded the paper, pressed a lavender sprig between its folds, and left it inside the bell jar before placing it quietly back on the returned shelf. It became a ritual. A slow dance of paper and petals. A courtship of metaphors. Even now, as I sit here in this quiet bar sipping something sweet and amber, watching the rain draw silver lines down the window, I can still remember the scent of that flower. The exact tilt of his handwriting. Love, it turns out, doesn't need a voice. Sometimes it just needs a quiet reader. And the courage to turn the next page. Would you have done the same, dear traveler? Left a flower for someone you barely knew just because they looked like they needed to be seen. Part 5. The Almost Meeting. I still remember that evening. The way the air inside the library felt a little too warm from the bodies gathered in that tight room. The smell of paperbacks, cinnamon tea someone had brought in a thermos, and just a hint of his cologne drifting in and out of reach. It was the first and only time I ever saw him outside the shadows between the shelves. Not through a book spine or a reflection in the window. But right there, just across the circle of folding chairs they'd set up for the monthly book club. He sat down late. Not hurried, no, he never rushed. He moved like he knew time would wait for him. Like words waited for him. And then, his eyes met mine. Just for a second. Like two thoughts accidentally brushing past each other in a dream. I felt something go very quiet inside me. A pause. As if the world, for that one brief moment, forgot how to exhale. I looked away first. I always did. That was my defense, pretending not to notice what I always noticed. The conversation around us was about Bronte. Or maybe Austen. I couldn't hear a word of it. Not with my heartbeat drumming inside my ears, telling me, he saw you. He really saw you. But neither of us spoke. Not a word, not even a smile. Just the glance. Later, I left first. I told myself it was better that way. That silence was safer. That we'd ruined something precious the moment we tried to name it. And yet, as I stepped out into the cool night and the rain tapped softly on my umbrella, I wondered, had I made the whole thing up? Had all those poems, the petals, the breathless spaces between us, been nothing more than a girl's dream stitched into the margins of her memory? But the truth was his eyes said otherwise. And I didn't imagine that. Did you ever feel that, my dear? That strange electricity in the air when someone doesn't speak to you. But the silence between you shouts something real. Sometimes, I still wonder, what if I had stayed? What if one of us had said hello? But we didn't. And so our story stayed suspended. Like that dried flower between pages. Pressed, preserved, but never lived out loud. Part 6. A poem left behind. There was a stillness in the air that week. The kind that settles in after a thunderstorm, but without the storm ever arriving. Just that waiting feeling, lingering, uneasy. I kept checking the books. the poetry section, the philosophy shelf, even the obscure aisle with the tattered travel journals no one else touched. But there was nothing. No poems. No petals. Not even a folded corner to pretend he'd been there. It felt like the pages were empty in a new kind of way. Like silence had crawled between every line, pressing itself into the places where his words used to live. At first, I told myself maybe he was just busy. Exams, maybe. A trip. A cold. But a week became 2. Then 3. And something in me began to ache in a place I hadn't known could ache. Not the kind of pain you scream over. No, this was quieter. Like a window left open on a rainy night, slowly soaking the corners of your soul without you even realizing it. I missed him. This boy whose voice I'd never heard. Whose name I never asked for. Who never touched my hand, and yet left fingerprints on every part of me. And then one evening, I found it. Tucked between pages 213 and 214 of a worn volume of Rilke. A poem, handwritten on a yellowing scrap torn from the back of a notebook. His handwriting was unmistakable. Loose, thoughtful curves. Letters leaning into one another like they were whispering. There were only 3 lines. If we are 2 ships passing in the dusk, I am grateful the sea between us was made of words. I'm moving. This is my goodbye. I read it again. And again. The words blurred a little as my eyes filled, though I didn't cry exactly. It was something softer than sadness. Something closer to longing wrapped in peace. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't ask to meet. Didn't he leave an address? No number. No full name. Just that. A goodbye that somehow felt like a gift. And for days after, I kept the note in my coat pocket, folded carefully, like a heartbeat I could carry with me. Sometimes, I'd reach in and press my fingers against it, just to make sure it was still there. He was gone. And yet, some part of him still lived in the quiet corners of that library. Between the shelves, in the shadows. In the dried flower now resting between the pages of my favorite book, Part 7, The Flower in Her Diary. I didn't know where else to keep it. The flower, that pressed, faded bloom once full of scent and sun, now quiet, like a secret whispered too long ago. So I slipped it between the last 2 pages of my diary, the ones I always meant to fill but never did. It felt right there. Tucked behind old dreams and half-thoughts. Behind entries about rainy mornings, missed buses, the way the light fell through the library windows. Sometimes I would open to that page slowly, like approaching a sleeping animal you didn't want to wake. And there it would be. A little more brittle than before. The color fading, but still beautiful in that fragile way only time can shape. His final poem, the one he left tucked between the pages of Rilke, I copied it in pen. Neatly. Carefully. Like it mattered. And some nights, like tonight, I'd sit on the floor with my knees pulled to my chest, diary open in my lap, and read it out loud. If we are two ships passing in the dusk, I am grateful the sea between us was made of words. I'm moving. This is my goodbye. I always read it slowly, letting each word land, letting the silence that followed wrap itself around the room. There's something about reading his words in my own voice that made it feel more real. Like I was borrowing his goodbye. Like I was giving it breath. And yet, every time I reached the end, the same thing would happen. I'd look up at the ceiling, at the soft flicker of shadows on plaster, and feel a quiet unraveling inside. Not sadness exactly. Just the ache of something almost magical slipping away. I used to believe the world was full of invisible threads. Tiny, unseen strings tying us to strangers, pulling us toward certain books, certain places, certain glances. And for a while, I thought maybe he was my thread. Now I'm not so sure. Maybe it was just a passing breeze. A folded note on a borrowed page. A pressed flower left behind by someone who understood beauty, but never stayed long enough to explain it. Still, I keep the flower. As if by holding onto it, I can keep something of that season, that version of me who once believed every poem was meant for her. The world feels a little less magical now. But not empty. Never empty. Because magic, I've learned, doesn't always stay. Sometimes it simply passes through. Part 8. Life moved forward. Time didn't stop for me. It never does. It simply pressed on, gently but firmly, like the turning of a page I wasn't quite ready for. I graduated that summer. Packed my things. Folded my life into boxes, books, sweaters, keepsakes, a diary with a flower still sleeping inside. And I left. For college. A city where the buildings were taller, and the nights felt louder. Where no one knew about the boy in the library, or the poems he wrote that made me feel like someone had seen me. I tried, to let go. To start over. To be someone else, someone whose heart didn't flutter at the sight of old books and faded ink. I chose literature as my major. Not because I was brave enough to chase words, but because words had already chased me, haunted me, held me, like soft hands in the dark. I met people, new faces, some kind, some clever, some who held doors open and laughed at the right moments. I even dated a boy who played guitar on the quad and said things like "you have stardust in your bones." But his words felt borrowed, too polished, too rehearsed. They didn't surprise me like the poems once had. Still, I tried. Went to lectures, studied until dawn, filled margins with notes and underlines. I read Keats and Plath, Dickinson and Neruda. But nothing ever quite hit the way his scribbles did, those quiet lines left just for me, written without an audience. And the libraries. No matter how many I stepped into, no matter how new the shelves, or bright the lights, they all carried something familiar. That same hush, that same pull. Like the past was tucked between the pages, waiting for me to find it again. Sometimes, I'd catch myself drifting toward the poetry section, running my fingers along the spines, searching for nothing and everything all at once. I'd pause at certain books. Books he once mentioned. Books that once carried his words. Hoping, maybe, just maybe, another note had found its way to me. But the pages stayed silent. He was gone. And yet, not really. Because every stanza, every metaphor, every aching line I read felt colored by him, as if he had quietly rearranged the way I experienced words. Life moved forward. As it should. But some parts of me stayed in that small town library. In the quiet. In the dust motes. In the corner chair where poems found me like soft footsteps behind my heart. And though I walked into the future with books in my arms and questions in my chest, I never stopped wondering if he had meant to leave, or if he had simply run out of words. Part 9. The letter she never sent. There was a letter I wrote once. A long one. Full of everything I had never said to him, though I never meant for him to read it. It sat in a drawer for months, maybe years. I folded it once, then twice, and placed it gently beneath some other things. Out of sight. Out of reach. I never sent it. But I think about it often. It was filled with all the things I wished I had told him. How his words had touched me. How I felt when I realized he was there, every time, with his poems waiting just for me. I had never asked him for anything, never expected anything but those poems. Those little pieces of his soul hidden between the pages had been enough. I suppose I didn't want to disturb that quiet, gentle world we had. It was ours. It didn't need to be made real in the way other people's worlds were made. I didn't want to ruin it by saying the wrong thing. And so, I never mailed it. That letter stayed hidden, just like everything else we never said. But years later, when I was older and the world had quieted a little, when life had shuffled me into different spaces, with different faces and different stories, I found it again. I read it then, reread it, and it felt strange. Like the words belonged to someone else. A younger version of me, someone still searching for what it all meant. Someone still wondering if the connection had ever been real. We were so young. Too young to understand what was fleeting and what was forever. Too young to know that the beautiful things we carried with us, even if unsaid, could become so heavy with time. It's funny, isn't it, how you can be so full of feelings and yet so unsure of their meaning. I smiled to myself as I read those words. A bittersweet smile, like the kind you give when you realize something beautiful has passed and yet still lives with you in the softest way. I didn't know him the way I thought I did back then. I didn't even know myself, really. I still don't. But what we shared was real, even if I couldn't put a name to it. Even if it was never meant to be anything more than two people finding solace in words that couldn't speak aloud. That letter, it was never meant to be sent. And maybe, in a way, that was the most perfect thing about it. Because the words were mine alone. And that was enough. Part 10, A Wedding and a Memory. I married someone else. He was kind. He was thoughtful. And for a while, it felt like everything I had hoped for. A steady, gentle love. The kind you can count on. The kind that feels safe. But there was something missing. Something quiet, like the soft rustling of pages that are never turned. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. But love, real love. It's something more, isn't it? Something that makes your heart race just by thinking about it. Something that fills you up even in silence. We went on our honeymoon. A beautiful place by the ocean. The waves were soft, the sky endless. And yet, somewhere deep inside, I felt a pull. A longing, quiet but persistent. One afternoon, while we wandered through the cobbled streets of a little town, I saw it. A bookshop. It wasn't much, just a small wooden door, half hidden by ivy, and a sign that looked like it had been there for ages. I didn't think about it. I didn't even ask myself why I stepped inside. It was instinct. Something whispered to me, softly, that this was where I was meant to be. I felt the familiar weight of books in the air, that special smell of paper and dust. I wandered through the aisles, my fingers brushing against the spines of old novels, poetry books. And then, I saw it. A book, its cover worn and soft. A familiar title. I picked it up. And there, between the pages, was a flower. A dry, pressed flower just like the one from before. The same flower. The one I had forgotten, tucked into that old book, so many years ago. And suddenly, everything felt like it was rushing back. The library. The poems. The boy with the quiet words. For a moment, I stood there, holding that book, feeling like time had turned itself inside out. It was like he had reached through time to leave me a piece of himself again. I wanted to laugh, to cry. But I did neither. Instead, I just stood there. And for the first time in years, I felt a strange, beautiful peace. I left the bookshop with the book still in my hands, though I never opened it. I felt that pull again. A pull that reminded me of something simple: life, love. It doesn't always need to be perfect. But sometimes, it needs to be remembered. And maybe that's all it ever was. A quiet memory tucked between pages, hidden just for me. And maybe, just maybe, it's okay to hold on to that. Part 11. A flower pressed in the wrong book. I don't remember exactly when I noticed it. The way he picked up the old book, the one that had been buried at the bottom of my drawer for years. It was just a moment. A fleeting second, really. I saw him glance at the cover, his fingers scheming over the edges. And then, he opened it. The sound of the pages turning was faint, like a whisper. I stood there, watching, feeling a strange twist in my stomach. He didn't ask any questions. He didn't comment. He just flipped through it, his eyes stopping for a moment when they reached the page where the flower was pressed. I could almost hear the question in his silence. What was this? Who was this for? But he didn't say a word. And I didn't either. It wasn't that I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't know how to. So instead, I smiled and said something about how old the book was. He nodded, and we moved on. Just like that. The flower stayed pressed inside the pages, a quiet thing, tucked away. I told myself it didn't mean anything anymore. That it was just a memory, a silly thing from long ago. But deep down, I knew better. He never asked again. Maybe he didn't need to. Maybe he understood that some things are better left unsaid. I think he knew. And yet, I still pretended. I pretended that the flower didn't matter. That it was just a faded piece of a past life, one that had no place in the present. I even convinced myself. I told myself it was just a flower, just a thing I had kept because it reminded me of a time when love felt different. When it was fleeting and fragile and beautiful, like a whisper in the dark. But still, every time I held that book, I couldn't help but feel it again, the weight of the memory, soft and tender. The way he had written those poems, his words so careful, so full of hope. The way we never spoke about it, and yet, everything was said. And now, here I was, years later, pretending that it didn't mean anything at all. That I didn't care. That it didn't matter. But maybe that was the biggest lie of all. Maybe, in the quiet of my heart, I still cared. Maybe I always would. Part 12. Rain on the library roof. The rain taps softly on the roof, a steady rhythm that feels like a quiet conversation. I stand in the entrance of the library, feeling the familiar coolness of the air as it greets me. The shelves, still lined with books, smell the same, dusty, warm, and comforting. Nothing has changed. The same soft light, dim and inviting, filters through the windows, casting shadows on the worn wooden floors. It's as if the years have passed in a blink, yet somehow everything feels suspended in time. I walk deeper into the space, my footsteps soft on the old floorboards. The silence is soothing, as if the books themselves are holding their breath, waiting for something. The quiet hum of the world outside feels distant, like a whisper behind a thick fog. In here, it's different. It's safe. It's as if the weight of the world doesn't quite reach this place. I remember the first time I came here, how I used to hide between the shelves, escaping into the worlds of others. I remember the feeling of his words in my hands, his poems folded delicately between pages of forgotten books. His handwriting, so neat, so full of longing. I wonder if he ever thought about me, too. If he ever walked through these same aisles, if he ever felt the pull of this place like I do now. I wonder if he ever returned. After all this time. After everything that's passed between us, if he ever stood here, between these walls, just like I am now. I don't know. But I wish I could ask. I wish I could know if he felt the same way, if he ever wondered about me. But there's no one here. No sign of him. Just me and the books, and the soft sound of rain outside. I sit at a table, letting the quiet surround me. There's no hurry now. No rush. The world outside can keep spinning, but for now, I am here. I wonder if he ever thinks about the library, too. I wonder if he remembers the same things, the same smells, the same stillness. Or maybe I'm the only one who still carries it, this little fragment of a memory tucked away like a pressed flower in the pages of time. I pick up an old book from the table, running my fingers over its cover. It's not the same one we used to share, but it feels familiar. And for a moment, I let myself pretend. I let myself imagine that we're still here together, in this place. That maybe he's just around the corner, waiting for me to turn and see him. But when I turn, the aisles are empty. The world feels quieter now. Maybe it always was, and I just never noticed before. I close the book gently, the soft thud of the pages echoing in the silence. I leave the library, stepping back into the rain. The memory of him still clings to me, like the scent of old paper, faded but present. And as I walk away, I wonder if I'll ever really leave it behind. Part 13, The Bar and the Book. It's present day again. I sit at a small table in a quiet book cafe, the book open in front of me. The dried flower, carefully pressed, rests gently on a napkin beside it. I trace the edges of the petals with my fingers, the softness of the paper reminding me of days long gone. Time feels strange here, like I'm caught between moments, drifting slowly with the scent of coffee and old books. The hum of conversation surrounds me, muffled and distant. I sip my coffee, feeling the warmth spread through my chest, and my eyes fall back on the book. The words are the same as they always were, comforting and familiar. But the flower feels different now. It's no longer just a memory. It's something I carry with me, a tiny piece of a past that will never be fully mine again. A soft voice pulls me from my thoughts. I look up to see the bartender, a kind-faced man with a gentle smile. He's holding a towel in his hand, wiping down the counter. His eyes fall on the flower, and he raises an eyebrow. "Is that from a lover?" he asks, his tone light, as if it's a question he's asked before. I smile softly, the corners of my lips lifting just slightly. "Not anymore," I say, my voice quieter than I expected. The words feel heavy on my tongue, like something I've carried for too long. He nods, not pressing further, and goes back to his work. But the question lingers in the air, floating between us like the scent of that old book. I glance down at the dried flower again. It's so delicate, so fragile. And yet, it's lasted. It's held on, despite everything. I think of him, of the boy who once sat across from me, hidden among the shelves, writing his poems just for me. The quiet ache of that connection feels distant now, like something that belongs to someone else. But in moments like this, it's still here. The words, the flower, the memories that drift between the pages like dust in the sunlight. Maybe it wasn't meant to last forever. Maybe it was just a small chapter in a much larger story. But still, I wonder what he's doing now. Does he think about those days in the library? Does he remember the poems, the ones he wrote for me in secret? The bartender brings me my drink, his presence breaking my reverie. I thank him, my fingers brushing the cup, the warmth, the welcome comfort against the cool air. He gives me a smile, and I return it, though it's not quite as bright as it once was. I glance down at the flower once more. It's still here, with me. A piece of the past, pressed between the pages of a story that isn't finished yet. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Part 14, she reads aloud. I open the book again, the pages slightly yellowed with time, yet still holding their weight. The dried flower rests gently between the pages, like a secret tucked away, waiting to be remembered. I let my fingers trace the edges of the pages, feeling the familiar texture, the worn corners that have borne the weight of so many memories. I take a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I begin to read aloud. The words are his words from so long ago. I don't know why I've waited so long. Maybe I needed the time to forget, or maybe I needed the time to remember. The first poem rolls off my tongue like it's still fresh, as if he wrote it only yesterday. It's strange how words can stay with you, lodged deep in your mind, even after so many years. His voice is still there, soft and shy, hidden behind every line. I can almost hear him, his voice as clear as it was in the library, as quiet as a secret between us. I read the next one, then the next, one by one. Each poem feels like a thread pulling me back in time, to that place where we first met. The words feel different now, older, like a memory fading into the distance, but still so real. His words are timeless, and for a moment, I'm there again sitting in the quiet corner of the library, the world outside fading away. I whisper the final poem, the last one I never heard him say out loud. It's a fragile thing, like the flower pressed in the pages. I feel it catch in my throat, the emotion of it all rushing back, as fresh as the first time he read it to me in the soft light. He never knew what those words meant to me, how they changed me, how they stayed with me long after he was gone. I close my eyes, and for a moment, I can almost see him, his shy smile, the way he looked down at the floor when he spoke. His poems were his heart laid bare, and I was the only one who ever heard them. The words still feel real, even now. They haven't lost their magic, even though the years have passed. I can almost feel him here, as if he is still waiting in that corner of the library, writing his words just for me. But it's all gone now. All I have left are the words and the flower. And in this moment, that feels like enough. I close the book gently, pressing the flower between the pages once more. For the first time in a long time, I feel a sense of peace, as if I've come full circle. Maybe it wasn't meant to last forever. But these words, this flower, they are a part of me, a part of the story that still lives inside me. I stand up slowly, the weight of the book in my hands a comfort. The past may be behind me, but it hasn't disappeared. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to carry me forward. Part 15, A Familiar Stranger. I'm sitting there, lost in the quiet of the cafe, the book resting on my lap like an old friend. The air is thick with the warmth of the afternoon sun, the scent of coffee, and the faint hum of conversations floating around me. My fingers trace the edge of the book absent-mindedly, feeling the familiar weight of it. And then, out of nowhere, a man walks in. I don't look up at first, just the usual passing glance of someone walking through the door. But then something makes me pause, just for a second. There's something about him. Something familiar. I don't know what it is, maybe it's the way he moves, the way he carries himself, but for a brief moment, I feel like I've seen him before. I raise my eyes slowly, and he is standing there, looking at the bookshelves, scanning the titles as if searching for something specific. It's only when he turns his head, catching my eye for just a moment, that I realize there's something more to him. He doesn't smile, but there's a flicker of recognition in his gaze. I can't place it. Then, he notices the book in my hands. A slight hesitation. A pause in his step. He looks at it for a second, and something shifts in his eyes, like he knows what it means. He takes a breath. And then, as if testing the waters, he asks, his voice soft, "Do you remember that flower?" His words hang in the air, suspended between us. I don't speak for a moment, just stare at him, unsure whether I've heard him right. But when I look at him again, I realize the familiarity isn't just in his eyes. It's in his voice, the same quiet, almost hesitant tone that I remember from years ago. The voice of the boy who once whispered poems to me in the corners of that library. For a moment, time seems to stop. I can feel my heart beat faster, a rush of emotions flooding me all at once. It's him. The boy from the library. The one who wrote those poems, who left the flower pressed in the pages. He doesn't say anything more, just watches me, waiting for a response. I open my mouth to speak, but the words catch in my throat. How is this possible? How is he here, standing in front of me after all these years? I think back to the last time I saw him. It was a long time ago, before life pulled us in different directions. And now here he is, a stranger I somehow know, with a question that feels both foreign and intimate. I clear my throat, trying to steady myself. Yes, I finally say, my voice barely above a whisper. I remember. The words feel strange, almost like an admission of something I didn't realize I was still holding onto. He smiles then, a small, knowing smile, like he's finally found the answer to something he's been wondering all this time. But there's no more need for words, not yet. For a moment, we just stand there, silently acknowledging the past, and all that's left between us is the memory of a flower pressed in the pages of an old book. Part 16, The Truth Between Lines. We sit there, in the quiet cafe, the weight of years between us now. His words hang in the air like a delicate thread, connecting past to present. I had to come back, he says, his voice soft but steady. He glances at the book in my lap, the one with the dried flower inside. I never thought I'd find it again, he continues. His gaze turns inward for a moment, as though he's searching for the right words. It was my mother's, he says, his voice quieter now. I blink, trying to make sense of what he's saying. You were here, then, I whisper, feeling the pull of the memory, the realization coming to me. He nods, his expression unreadable. I found one of her old poems, tucked away in one of her books. His eyes meet mine, a hint of something hidden in them. I kept writing, he says slowly, just not in the same place. There's a moment of silence as his words settle between us, like a soft rain on a quiet afternoon. I don't speak, just let the weight of his confession sink in. He had kept writing. The boy who once whispered poetry to me in the library, the one who had pressed a flower between the pages of a book he had never stopped. But why? Why didn't you tell me? I ask, the question slipping out before I can stop it. He looks down at the table, the quiet stretch of time between us. I don't know, he says finally, his voice thick with regret. Maybe I thought you'd forget. Or maybe I was just scared you wouldn't remember me the way I remembered you. I can feel the ache of his words, like an old bruise that never fully healed. He keeps his eyes on the table, avoiding my gaze, and I wonder if he is still afraid. But I can't deny the truth in his words, how life had pulled us apart, how we had gone in different directions, and how time had kept us separate. I take a deep breath. You kept writing, I say softly, almost to myself. His gaze flickers back to me, and I catch a glimpse of the same boy I once knew, the one who wrote poetry in secret, who pressed flowers between the pages of old books. But there's something else in his eyes now, something older, something that comes from living a life that's moved on without me. Yes, he says quietly, his voice now carrying a quiet conviction. I had to keep writing. Even when I wasn't writing to you. And just like that, it feels as though everything has come full circle. The boy who wrote to me, the man who sits before me now, has carried something with him all these years, a truth that's been hidden between the lines of his words. There's nothing more to say, not yet. The room feels smaller now, the world outside fading away. I don't know what happens next. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like the past and present are meeting in a way I never expected. He takes a slow breath, and the moment stretches between us, hanging in the air like the scent of old books and forgotten memories. I look at him, and in the silence, it feels like we've both been given a chance to breathe again. Part 17. A new poem, a new page. We walk together, side by side, as though the years between us had melted away. There's an ease to it now, a quiet understanding in the way our steps match, almost as if we're not two people, but one. The sun is low, casting long shadows over the path, and the world feels still, like it's holding its breath for something. We talk about the years, the ones that passed too quickly, the ones that felt like they lasted forever. There's laughter between us, light and free, as though time itself has softened the edges of our past. No pressure now, no expectations. Just two people, talking about life and its curious twists and turns. I reach into my bag, the one that's been with me all this time, and pull out a small notebook. It's the same one I've been writing in for weeks, the one with all the little poems scribbled inside, the ones I never intended for anyone else to read. But now, here we are, and the words seem to call out to be shared. He stops walking when I open it, a curious look crossing his face. I look at him, wondering if he can feel what I feel, the strange pull of the past, the way it tugs at me in ways I didn't expect. I don't speak at first, just flip through the pages until I find the one I'm looking for. This one, I say quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. He nods, his eyes meeting mine with an unreadable expression, and I begin to read. It's a poem. A poem I wrote just last week, without knowing why or how. The words came to me so easily, flowing out like a stream, and when I was done, I wondered who I had been writing to. I hadn't thought about it at the time, but now it feels as though it was always meant for him. I read aloud, the words tumbling out softly, as though I'm not sure they're mine to share. I've been waiting for this moment. Though I didn't know that in the quiet spaces between us, you were always there. I pause for a moment, the words still lingering in the air. He doesn't speak, just stands there, listening, his face softening as he takes in the words. And though the years have pulled us apart, the pieces of you still live inside me, waiting for the day we find each other again. When I finish, I look up at him, unsure of what to say next. He's quiet, his expression unreadable, and for a moment, it feels like the world has paused, holding its breath. The only sound is the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. You wrote that for me, he asks, his voice low. I nod, still unsure, still feeling the weight of what I've just shared. I didn't know why I wrote it, I say softly, my voice barely more than a murmur. But it felt right. As if it was meant for you, even if I didn't know it at the time. He smiles then, a small, soft smile that reaches his eyes. I think I understand, he says, his voice gentle. And in that moment, I realize that maybe, just maybe, we've both been waiting for this moment all along. We continue walking, side by side, the poem still hanging in the air between us, like a promise. No more words are needed. Just the quiet understanding that sometimes, the words we need to say don't always come at the right time. But when they do, they find a place to settle soft, gentle, and real. And for the first time in a long time, it feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Part 18, A dried flower in a glass frame. The apartment is quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I sit at the small wooden table by the window, the sunlight streaming in, painting the room in soft, golden hues. In front of me, resting gently on a white napkin, is the dried flower. It's delicate, the color faded slightly over the years, but still beautiful in its own way. It's a symbol of something I thought I'd left behind, a piece of a past I never truly let go of. I carefully lift the flower, feeling the gentle fragility of it in my hands, as if it could crumble at the slightest touch. But it doesn't. It stays whole, preserved in time, much like the memories of that boy, the one I met in the library all those years ago. I've been carrying him with me in some small, quiet way, even when I didn't know it. I find myself remembering more now than I ever did before his smile, the way he'd sneak little notes to me, the poems tucked inside forgotten books. And now, here I am, holding this little flower, the remnants of something that never had a chance to fully bloom. I take a deep breath and stand up, walking over to the shelf by the window. There's an empty space there, waiting for something to fill it. I pick up a small glass frame, one that's been sitting on the shelf for weeks, waiting for a moment like this. With careful hands, I place the flower inside, its delicate petals resting gently against the glass. It feels right, somehow, as if the flower has found its place. I step back and look at it for a moment, my fingers lightly tracing the edges of the frame. The glass reflects the light, casting soft shadows on the wall behind it. It's simple, but it feels important, like the final piece of a puzzle I didn't even know I was solving. I sit back down at the table, the flower in its frame now a part of my space, a part of my life. It's strange, isn't it, how something so small can hold so much meaning, so many memories. A flower. A poem. A moment in time. I open the book again, the one with the dried flower inside. I read the words once more, softly, letting them flow through me. And then, I find myself reading the last line aloud, as if it's the final word in a story that has no ending. If I could turn the page again, I wouldn't change a single word. I pause, the words hanging in the air, and for a moment, I feel a sense of peace settle over me. The story is over, or maybe it's just beginning. Either way, it doesn't matter. Because the words, the flower, the memories, they'll always be here. In this moment, in this room, in this life. I close the book gently, feeling the weight of it in my hands, and place it back on the shelf. The flower in the frame, the words in the book, they're all part of something bigger now, something that doesn't need to be explained. I sit back and close my eyes, letting the quiet of the room wash over me. And for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace.